Oh, hello, and welcome. My name is Ryan, and I'm a guide here at Hearst Castle, home to William Randolph Hearst, the world's first international multimedia mogul. 28 newspapers, 8 radio stations, a film production company, and 14 magazines. You may have heard of them. Harper's Bazaar, Good Housekeeping, Town & Country, Popular Mechanics, Motor, and Cosmopolitan, to name just a few. But how does a person become one of the most powerful and influential people of their time? Well, that is a good question, not so easily answered. Today we will attempt to explore the complex nature of William Randolph Hearst and his rise to power through his media empire as we track some of the highlights of his life. This will be the first episode of a new series entitled Hearst the Publisher. Now, before we begin, I just would like to remind everybody that during this ongoing coronavirus pandemic, Governor Newsom has mandated the wearing of face masks in all indoor and outdoor public areas, as well as maintaining at least 6 feet of physical distancing at all times. This is not just for your safety, but for the safety of others around you as well. Hearst Castle still remains closed to the public at this time. Now, in order to place this discussion in the proper context, I think it is important to start with a definition: ambition. An earnest desire for some type of achievement or distinction as power, honor, fame, or wealth, and the willingness to strive for its attainment. William Randolph Hearst attended Harvard, and his first foray into the world of journalism was getting elected as business manager of the Harvard Lampoon. He expanded the Lampoon's circulation by 50%, more than doubled the revenue, and converted the bottom line from a substantial deficit to an even more substantial surplus. David Nassau, author of The Chief, put it this way: in less than 2 years at Harvard, he had accomplished a small miracle. He had gotten himself elected to the top clubs on campus, earned himself a reputation as a first-class dandy, grown an impressive mustache, found a splendid tailor, and acquired a pet alligator named Charlie that lived with him in his suite. Though he had reached the pinnacle of Harvard society, he was still looked at as an outsider who had bought his way into his position. In other words, not entitled to his status by birth, and he was little esteemed in the eyes of the college. He would ultimately choose to reject Boston society, instead spending much of his time at musical comedy theaters, after-hours clubs, and restaurants in the Boston and New York area. This is a practice that he would retain throughout his life. In short, William Randolph Hearst was not a good student. After all, college had been his mother Phoebe's idea, not his, and his father George wasn't thrilled about it either. Now, he would ultimately be suspended from Harvard in his junior year due to his low grades and extracurricular activities. He drank, smoked cigars, and spent too much, as well as being quite mischievous. According to one of his biographers, he once placed a donkey in the dean's office with a sign that read, "Now there's 2 of you." And Hearst often declared in his later years, "It takes a good mind to resist education." Meanwhile, his father, George Hearst, after making his fortune in the mining industry, was now turning his attention to politics with his remaining years of life. He had interest in becoming governor or senator for the state of California. So he bought the failing San Francisco Examiner in 1880 in hopes of using it as a democratic voice to keep the people informed of political issues, candidates' rallies, and of course reminding them of their civic duty as responsible citizens to vote. Problem is, George Hearst didn't know how to run a newspaper, and the Examiner had been losing too much money for too long, making it a financial liability. William Randolph Hearst told his father, in essence, "The reason it's not making money is because it's not the best. Give the paper to me, and I will make it the best." In 1887, at the age of 24, freshly suspended from Harvard and with no clear future path, William Randolph Hearst would take over his father's newspaper and, indeed, would turn it into a profitable and popular publication. At this time, I would like to introduce another definition: sensationalism, subject matter, language, or style, producing or designed to produce startling or thrilling impressions, or to excite and please vulgar taste. One of William Randolph Hearst's idols in the publishing world was Joseph Pulitzer, who ran the New York World newspaper. Hearst eventually challenged Pulitzer by buying the rival paper, New York Journal. Now, Pulitzer had already been printing sensationalism, but in an attempt to steal away Pulitzer's readership, Hearst began filling his newspapers with increasingly sensationalistic headlines of sex, murder, drugs, many of which had little basis in reality. Now, I don't mean to imply that it was false news all the time, but Hearst was a master embellisher. For example, taking something that's about 50% true, adding his own 50% of enhancements to it, something that has come to be known as yellow journalism or tabloid journalism, or early 20th century version of what we call clickbait. This bold marketing strategy was designed to sell newspapers and spark the interest of the curious public, many of whom were newly arrived working-class immigrant Americans. Pulitzer decided to increase his sensationalistic material as well in an attempt to stop his readers from being stolen away. But it would not just be the readers that Hearst would end up stealing. Much of Pulitzer's staff, including his most brilliant editor, Morrill Goddard, would wind up working for Hearst at a much higher wage increase. And in the last few years of the 19th century, Hearst and Pulitzer went to war. A circulation war, that is. And Hearst would eventually come up on top, beating Pulitzer at his own game. In the end, it said that Pulitzer was left with an empty office and one stenographer. Even the office cat had defected to Hearst, and at one point, 1 in 4 American families read a Hearst publication on the weekends. One of the most sensationalistic stories in his newspapers during that time period revolved around the sinking of the USS Maine on the Cuban harbor in 1898. William Randolph Hearst is often credited for starting the Spanish-American War, but the conditions in Cuba at that time were ideal for Hearst's most favorite sensationalistic plot lines. There was plenty of material about corruption, villainy, political intrigue, innocent victims with heroes coming to the aid. And while many historians would agree that even though he certainly fanned the flames of war through his newspapers, with over 100 years of hindsight at this point, a fair assessment is that even if William Randolph Hearst had never gone into publishing, the United States would still have declared war on Spain in April of 1898. So, did Hearst's influence have any real impact as far as credit or blame goes for starting that conflict? No. But he would certainly have you believe that it did, which is a testament to William Randolph Hearst's genius as a self-promoter. We'll leave it there for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you soon.